Hey everybody, this is Derek Stevens, the Crow from 3dbuzz.com. I hope you all are doing well tonight. Lots going on. Hoping to talk more about attributes, maybe some weapon possibilities tonight. What we want our individuals to be able to do in combat, at least 3 different attacks. We have the gang is all here. Go ahead and sound off one at a time, if you will. Roll call.
Hello.
That is good, but who the hell are you?
Oh, okay. Vincent is my name.
And smoozing with the women's is game. Who else is here?
Wolf.
Hello. NATO
Wolf
here.
and NATO. All the key
Hey, it's
players.
Richard.
Hey, Richard, man. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Good. I actually have a day off. I don't know what the heck to do with my time.
So you come here to hang out with us, but we're getting lots accomplished, so that's always, always good. Really?
Absolutely.
Keep current color scheme. 50 Shades of Nelson's here, and we have more people filtering in, it looks like. We'll go ahead and get started right now. There's several people that did not decide to sound off. That's cool. I won't bite. It's all good. Again, let's go ahead and get started with the art development side. Mr. NATO, I know you were busy last week. Does anybody want to care to recap what went on last week for Mr. NATO? Anybody at all? It's not named Derek. All right, I guess I'll be recapping. You guys can help me remember. Is anybody else there at all? Holy crap on a cracker, people.
Can you say that in a class? Correct.
Crap on a cracker. I'm not talking about crack. I'm not talking about the narcotic. Crap as in poop on a cracker.
So you can say crap?
You can say crap.
Not really.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Hello.
Steve's here.
Perfect timing.
I was just about to say, well, Steve's not here to say no, so yeah, you can say crap.
Yeah, I know you were here. Wait a second.
Like
Okay,
a
Steve.
freaking shark.
Could you do a quick recap on the last
He was
class?
busy last week. He wasn't here all the entire show. So I will be...
We
We
talked a
talked-
little about gameplay. I mean, some of us have never or didn't, either haven't played that kind of game or had, I know I had some concerns for just how the battles would go and keeping things not feeling cheap and encouraging people to fight and not to just like hit and run away, and if could do things like that. And but I was told that that's pretty much that they've made a lot of changes since I played that little bit I played back. It was just a mod for Warcraft 3.
Yeah, so we had a lot of concerns about the old strategies, good strategies, new strategies. We wanted to make sure that it would be very noob-friendly. Wolf had some experiences in the past with a game that did not make him very happy, wasn't for sure about the rules and regulations and best strategies, what to spend his money for before each match. And we are definitely concerned about that. We want to make this as easy as possible. I don't want it to be like vanilla WoW, like they call it now, where anybody can level at a pretty quick rate. But at the same time, because I work all the time, and I did when I played WoW, I wasn't one of these kids who lived at home with mommy and daddy, and that's all I did. And, I couldn't raid with everybody to get all the killer gear. So I'm kind of glad they vanilla WoW down. I want to make this game challenging for the hardcore players, but I also want to make it rewarding for those guys and gals who just want to show up, and play 25, 40 minutes, something here and there every now and then. I want to make it fresh and new for them as well. Mr. Jizba, is he here yet?
No.
That would be a big fat no. He has got a map that we'll be looking at here in a little bit. What was the technical name for it, Mr. Steve? It was like a raised platform map, a level map where we can see height differentials.
A height map?
Thank you, height map. Went brain dead. Insomnia affecting Derek badly too. Yeah, a height map. I think we've decided, Mr. NATO, to come up with a desert sort of rocky scene for our first, I guess, help, Steve. Derek can't talk. Think processing bad.
Desert
Map.
map?
Map for the gauntlet, not gauntlet. Arena. Wow. No,
All right.
So you guys want to make a desert map for the arena?
Yes, with a bunch of crags and crevices and, well, you can see my little rock thing I've been working on here the last 20 minutes, or not even 20 minutes. But, so, we can have our characters run through here. And again, this is going to be in 3D or third person, so you'll be running around and twisting through here, and it'll be nice to be able to hide.
Awesome,
Yeah.
because I'm currently making some kind of a, well, it's not a desert, it's more of a cliff, but it can be, it's like a desert, cliff from a desert.
That's cool. I figured if we get like 50 to 60 of these things, and they shouldn't be that hard to do, we can mix and match and make our terrain out of that. Mr. Jezba's got texture maps loaded up in our Dropbox, so we'll all be utilizing them so they all look the same. We have a uniform feel from them. So we're definitely moving forward, and I'm very happy about that. But in thinking about what else to talk about tonight, I really kind of want to, I know we're still on attributes, but I kind of want to talk about attacks as well. I like to have at least 3 to 4 different attacks. Does that sound something that's plausible, Mr. NATO?
Well, currently characters have 5 abilities, one of which is a sort of passive ability that the player can't activate. So having your basic 4 attacks, as it were, or spells, dependent on the character type, and then an auto attack, again dependent on the character type, whether that's melee or ranged or whatever. And then you sort of flavor those. There's a certain number of basic character types upon which you add characterization and add flavor based on the abilities that they have, rather than changing the way their kind of base stats work. So in essence, sort of. It's very specific onto characters rather than having kind of a list of attack types, and then you just give whatever character you have a selection of those. Really, at the moment, my main concern is trying to get the genericized system working and kind of conceptualized before coming up with any character concepts. I'm really looking at particular kind of characters. One of the things I'm going to do is, once I have the base model down, I'm going to come up with just 2 or 3 example characters to kind of highlight how the system works. This week has been an exceptionally busy week, partly because my cat unfortunately had a bad accident and I've had to spend a lot of time looking after her, so that's why I wasn't here last week. So yeah, hopefully this week will be slightly less busy. As reference to the meeting 2 weeks ago when we discussed attribute ranges, I think I probably will end up going with a concept that most character stats, with the exception of health, I think, and anything that is kind of a percentage based, will be from 0 to 100. Obviously, a percentage base is 0 to 100, but that's a fixed range, whereas with generic character stats having this range from 0 to 100, it's not a fixed range, so at some points characters can go over 100, but you wouldn't kind of stat out any character to do that specifically. It would be through a special ability or something. And a character average being around 20 or so, between about 10 and 20, and then each level they gain inside an arena, inside a match, gains a small additional value to each of those stats. One of the questions I have is, there are two sort of models to do that based off. You have a system where characters gain a set amount per level, no matter what the character is. So a character progressing from level 1 to 2 would gain 10 attack damage, regardless of how that character worked. Now that's quite simple and quite understandable because it's generic, it's across all characters. You don't need to learn the specific character mechanics. Or you don't need to factor that progression into your character mechanics and how you play that character. But it's very limiting. There's less depth there. The other thing you can do is you can have each character type have its own rate of progression for each stat. So certain characters might gain health faster than others per level. Now that would be quite a small differential, so it might be 2 or 3 points it gains per level, but when you have a range between sort of 4 and 8 that you gain each level, it can make a big difference. On top of that, I don't want to have any of the temporary items we're going to have stats on them that boost characters over a final limit of approximately 200. Again, there's a little bit of give and take there, but that's the sort of range I'm looking at. So a character with as much attack damage as you can physically put on a character should, in theory, have no more than 200, plus or minus 10 or something like that. That's kind of the paradigm I'm working on at the moment. Things like health are a bit different because you have certain characters that have, certain tanky characters, for example, might have their thing being that they have lots and lots of health, whereas you might have attacking character, DPS characters have low health, and health is one of the kind of big variations on how a character appears in combat. If you see a character with low health, you are going to target that character a lot more. So if you have a lot of a higher range of health to play with, it gives you a lot more fidelity, a lot more sort of a sense of control over that aspect of who's going, deciding when to attack someone. Well, at least that's my theory, and I'm still processing some of these ideas, but that's the kind of basic concept so far.
All right, so when we get, but you decide on this is what we're going to do, what is the next step? Are you going to hand it to Nelson and say this is what I want, and he's going to write code for it, or how's that going to work?
The way I envision this process working is Nelson is currently doing his own thing. So working out the very basics of the system, getting people running around in the world, until he has a system where we have characters can log in, players can log into an account, choose a character or create a character, and get that character into some kind of world. Until we're at that point, the implementation of the stat system is kind of nebulous. As long as it's down in a form that he can start programming from, I'm not too worried about the implementation phase. What I'm sort of a little bit interested in is getting to that stage that should be the first stage we get to, because once we have characters running around the world and having fights, we can start tweaking things, modifying things. The next step really is to start coming up with our character types and sort of proofing that the stat system works for all the character types we want to have, coming up with all the kind of weird edge case concepts that we want to implement that affect how the stat system balances. We're also going to want to come up with our temporary items so we know the kind of range and the kind of balance that characters are going to have, and how those items are going to start affecting our character stats. Now, this doesn't mean coming up with absolutely every single item or every single character type in the game we want straight away, but it's kind of looking at what the average character stat is, what the average character is going to be like, and then looking at what sort of the strange and edge case character is going to be like, and sort of checking that we've come up with a system and an algorithm for working out how strong a character type can be, and then from that we can. My current plan is for developing characters is to almost have a character generation system. So you have a certain number of points, and you attribute those points to a certain range, sort of abilities, so that and each ability would be sort of ranked in a different weighting. So you spend these points to generate your character, or a character type. So this basically means that all the character types should, in theory, if you write the system correctly, be balanced. One of the reasons why I want to do this is because then we have quite a nice, simple system, in theory, that people can go, okay, well, this is my idea, this, come up with their own characters. Design-wise, this isn't during gameplay. This is the design team coming up with the character types that we're going to give players access to. The choke point in that process, however, is when you start giving players the ability to come up with their own character types in this sort of environment, you run into the problem of having abilities being too powerful compared to other abilities on other characters. So, for example, having a particular ability have a range based on a character's full health stat. So, which is, it's not something I'd suggest doing, but it's a possible combination. So, if you have a character, if you have a character buying up lots and lots of health gain items, so they have a massive amount of health, that effectively means they can hit any character on the game, in the game at all that they want to, which obviously is a lot more powerful than, say, having an ability where if a character's on low health, they gain more attack damage, attack speed even, as they kind of go into a furious rage, because there's a sort of inherent balance there. If the more health, the lower your health, the more easily you'll be killed. However, being on that low health kind of gives your character a bit more power, so you should be balancing those things. But okay, when we come up with these characters, we're going to have to go send them between each other, kind of think about the impacts of each character abilities and how the stat weighting works. So yeah, we can come up with a simple stat weighting system to skeleton characters out, and then discuss how the character abilities work with each other and work compared to others. So it's quite a long, intensive process, and to be fair, we might only need to start discussing 3 or 4 character types to begin with, more as a proof of concept than anything, so players can get in the world and start throwing things around. But as I said, that step comes after Nelson has implemented his people running around code, as I'm referring to it as, which, as I understand, has quite a basic. So if you can hear that scratching sound, it's the cat scratching at her plastic cone. So, yeah, as far as I understand with Nelson's code, that he has sort of spheres running around in the world, and not much else so far. But that's the kind of very basic framework for getting people to log into a system. So things are happening, things are coming along.
He does have login already set up.
Yeah, that's what I said. That login framework is in so far, but it's not kind of, as far as I know, progressed far beyond that so far.
What else are you looking for though? Like a chat system or something, or?
Basically,
as far as running around a world, it's kind of done that.
Well, it's things like targeting, character targeting,
Oh, yeah.
and having proper collision in place, and having proper sort of raycasting for targeting spells, and that kind of thing, the toolkit that we would use to create abilities. And it's that kind of stuff takes quite a lot more time than I think people realise, because it requires a lot of server-side discussion, a lot of sending data back and forth.
Yeah. Okay.
Do we have a time frame? Do we want to try to make a milestone that's actually achievable? I don't want to say, hey, Nelson, have it all done by tomorrow. I want something realistic. You know what I'm saying?
I wouldn't want to push Nelson into a time frame, because he has so many other kind of projects to work on at the moment. To be fair, at the moment, the design side, I wouldn't say we're pushing past where the coding is, but we are definitely projecting forward and sort of making some of the decisions for Nelson, which to me I think is actually the way it should work, because design is ultimately, at the end of the day, what frames the game, what focuses the game, and it's the job of the programmer to interpret that concept and that development document into the programming side of it, into the code base. The discussion goes back and forth between the two groups to try and work out what works, what doesn't, where we can fix things, where we can kind of come up with solutions to problems. But without a basic framework in place, a sort of a bare minimum, which I suspect will be actually end up very similar to the very old style, the very old tech demo. Not in implementation, not in the way that it's been programmed, but in the actual mechanics that were there. So players could log into a server, create a character, or pick a character they'd already created, get into the world, start running around, go between zones, target other characters, throw a spell at them or hit them with something and have that damage recorded, have some sort of inventory system so you can manage what your character has on them, have some sort of shop system so you can buy items, put them in your inventory. The very bare bones, the very sort of, from that sort of tool set, we can then build the game that we want to build. But that tool set has been informed by the choices we've made so far.
Right. I can agree with that, and I do like the fact that we're moving ahead. I'm anxious to see what all the other art guys have done so far tonight, and I was hoping that you'll be impressed by, like, hey, these guys have been working on this stuff.
Yeah, I will make a note about the level design stuff. One of the things with these arena-style games is that the exact details of the level do make a significant difference in the style of play. I will try and either later on today or next week I'll discuss kind of one of the areas in which the League of Legends or Dota style map, which has a very specific style, shape to it, is kind of defined by the gameplay that they're trying to push or trying to establish and allow for, rather than just being the space in which a game takes place. Which is, I think, one of the things people kind of mistake level design for. I think a lot of people think level design is really just about building boxes for people to fight in, whereas it really is about taking the game mechanics, taking the core concepts, breaking them apart, looking at them, looking where you can get players to understand them, look at them from a different aspect, interpret them, show them to the player, let them learn from how you're showing it to them, and really enable them to have the experience with the game rules that they want to have, rather than sort of either having no support to them, which is the random boxes around a space, or having it too closely formed, which is like the old style sort of railroad shooters. So if you've ever played something like an old shooter like Quake, or even Unreal Tournament, till now, we have custom maps. You'll find a lot of maps where it might look visually quite nice, but the gameplay just feels boring or wooden or just uninspired. It's mainly because people have just sort of not paid attention to the layout, to the space, to how the space flows, to how that space relates to the game mechanics. whether that's the core game mechanics of this is how you play the game, this is the things you can do, this is your things your character can do, or the strategic game mechanics like we're going to implement, we're going to allow for, I should say, in which, for example, you might have a character that, because they have a high rate of health regain, they are more successful at spending a lot of time in the jungle of the map, the middle of the map, which is not one of the lanes where the mobs go up and down, and it's more sheltered. They have a lot more support in that area, which is one of the notes to come from Dota and LoL, where you have these jungle characters. Now the map is designed specifically to allow for that gameplay style, and simultaneously there are a lot of characters who are designed to fill that role, which not only opens up an avenue of playstyle, so you have people who prefer to play with those sort of characters, but it also has a strategic value to the game, to a match itself. So yeah, that just as a note about game design is that if you kind of draw if you draw a map, and then I kind of look at it and go, well, that's a nice pretty picture you have there. That's maybe a bit harsh, but if I look at a map and draw and kind of criticize it quite a lot, it's not because I'm sort of hating on you or particularly anal. It's really key to get the map, to get the maps really perfect, and especially in this game design, especially in this game type, this game mode. But I mean, I'm gonna probably end up coming up with some levels at some point.
Okay, so I've got a question for you. What are the aspects that you would think make a good map?
For this style of gameplay,
Yeah.
really in particular, you're looking at things like vision, how much characters can see based on their location of, especially areas like the jungle in the center of the map, because there are certain paths that players can take to come behind your character and attack you from behind, which obviously if someone's attacking you from the front at the same time, it's a classic pincer maneuver and you can get killed that way. So having areas that break vision, so hedges, lots of rocks, that kind of thing.
If you look
you
at the
don't want to
screen,
have a
as you discussed, go ahead and kind of study this scene. This is from Nick. This is kind of what we were talking about.
I mean, this is quite a standard model of a Dota LoL style map, and as you can see, there are 3 sort of pathways between the 2 bases. These are generally known as lanes, and then you have down the other diagonal, you have what's known as the river, which is usually a very open central pathway that denotes the difference between the two sides. The areas in between, we see lots of little intricate little paths. This is called the jungle in general in these styles of games. And as you can see, that it would be quite easy for characters coming from the river area to get behind characters in a lane and attack them from behind. So as I say, vision's quite important in these sort of maps. You want areas where players not only are able to sneak around, however, you do allow the players who are going to be snuck up on the ability to spot other characters if they're paying attention, if they're thinking about what's happening.
And the cool thing about this is we have to remember the normal, like, League of Legends is kind of a 3/4 top view. This is going to be a WoW type sort of thing, so you can get kind of lost in the terrain, and you will have to watch your corners, which I think is
we can do a lot of Z-axis gameplay here, which is something I'm very interested in. You do kind of run into an issue where I see there's a bridge there as a concept. Now, obviously, I quite like the idea of having a bridge. That's not a problem. It's an interesting feature. You have lots of, like I said, Z-axis play. We have characters in the river against characters on the bridges. You might give a slight situational bonus or something like that. However, it would be very easy for a character just to camp underneath that bridge and attack anything that comes down the river. so as I said, vision becomes quite important. There are mechanics to aid in vision, which I'll talk about at some other point. But
Can we
vision,
spawn
vision
like,
is first. Sorry, Karen.
can we spawn like third-party creatures in there that to help, like, so we can't have somebody camping in there? We have
Yeah,
a third.
that's basically the solution to that problem.
Okay.
They're called, in other games, they're called wards, which are static objects that give a slight radius of vision around them. So yeah, vision's very important. Obviously, symmetry is very important in this type of gameplay because you want to really get players to think about their strategy rather than not abusing the map, but using the map, using a slight imbalance in the map to gain a massive advantage against an enemy. If you've ever played an asymmetrical capture the flag map, you can often find situations where you have a sniper spot which will completely ruin the gameplay because it's unbalanced. That kind of thing is very much more the case in this sort of gameplay, where it all comes down to the tactics, to the how you build your character, how you run, how your team play happens, how you run your characters and your team together. There are a few other notes I would make, but none are coming specifically to mind. I had this discussion with someone the other day, and now my mind's going a bit blank.
There's what you're thinking. There is something we touched on last week, which is the concept of whether the arena map should correlate to a real world, or like not real world, but the game world, the free roaming game world location. And I think if it does, it should only reflect it. Like maybe you can tell what area it is, but I don't think it. It seems to me that.
Well, first off, it is going to be instanced, yeah. So
right. Yeah, no, but like if the question was, should that also be, even though that would be its own instance, should that also be should there be something that represents that?
Yeah, you run into the situation in battlegrounds in World of Warcraft, where you have an area of the map which is instanced out for every battleground that happens, but it doesn't actually exist in the game world that you can go visit, which is how I'd choose to do it. What I might have is areas of the persistent world. That's the word I'm looking for. Areas of the persistent world that have a high sort of lots of similarities. So you can go, is this the same space? It looks very similar. You can assume that the battle at the arena is kind of in this area, but it's never specified exactly where it is.
That's what I was thinking, because the thing is, then it seems like otherwise you would have to put too much thought into having it work for both places, and
you run into
having it not work with either very well.
There is one difference to the WoW maps, is the fact that we're going to be having like cities that can be taken over based on the combat in these instances, where WoW doesn't have that. You don't gain territory for winning PvP matches. So in a way, the PvP does reflect in the persistent world, and we need to kind of show that.
Yes, I mean one of the methods I was thinking of doing that with is when a city is under threat of being taken. Oh, sorry. Let me start from the other way around. When a city is completely held by one side, there is no threat to it being taken. It just seems like a normal city. There's sort of markets happening. There's people carrying on their daily lives. There are generic quests like, I've run out of beer, please go get me some more beer. That kind of quests and things like that. As the city starts to be taken, things start happening, you start getting quests saying, man the barricades, help us build things to protect us against these invaders. And more and more the city starts to fall to the other side, or the risk starts growing, you start getting sort of damage appearing in the city. You start getting more and more sort of frantic defending quests, until at one point the city will change sides. How exactly we want to handle that, I'm not sure, especially because I would like to include the option for at a set point. Let's say for argument's sake, if there's 5% left in sort of taking a city, however we enumerate that, it's 5% before it gets taken. I'd like the idea that a group of players can get together and raid the city and capture key points around the city in the persistent world and take it like that, instead of having to take it through more and more matches. The downside of that is they don't necessarily gain the incremental increases to their experience and gold for doing so. However, taking the city, they will instantly take the city. They don't need to have X many matches.
Well, that will gain stuff to go towards their assisted character, like maybe experience to level up their assisted character, right?
Yeah, something like that. However, obviously there will be not only NPCs but other characters who don't want that to lose that city. So it would kind of become a battle over that. A battle over to actually in the city streets, opposed to these aliased out these instance areas, which would be kind of outside the city. I'm also thinking that for however many cities we have, I'd like to have a tailored map for each area, for each city, so that if players get bored of playing on the same map, they can change area. They can focus on a different area. I may also include, obviously this is progressing out to more and more feature creep, but having variable map size, so you might have a map for 3v3, you might have a map for 5v5, you may even have a map for, I don't know, 8v8 or something. I wouldn't possibly push it that far, maybe just the 3v3 and 5v5.
You mean that represents the same area?
That represents an area in the same region, but not necessarily the same actual geographical space, to give more of a sense that there is stuff going on around the city.
Yeah.
So you might have, like, this is a desert map, so the city will be a desert city. So the 3v3 version of that city's defense attack match would have different geometry to reflect the different gameplay style, but it would have very similar features. It would use the same kind of meshes, it would use the same kind of textures, but it would be designed differently.
You were talking about the persistent world and taking cities in the persistent world by taking key points. That gave me the thought that, yeah, I like that idea, but I think whatever side took it last, I think they should be able to hold it for a certain period of time, that
So
where
cool
it will
down
be,
before it can be taken
yeah,
again.
yeah. Otherwise it's just they're like, hey, we did it, and
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
now we have to defend it forever, and we can never do anything
You see some
else.
of those problems with PlanetSide 2, for instance, where points flick between sides endlessly, and it just becomes a bit draining.
Yeah.
There are numerous problems with that concept, which will need to be ironed out later. It's quite a future idea. For instance, if you have characters, if you have friendly characters in that city when it is taken, how do you handle that? Do they move somewhere else? Do they just free to be attacked? And it depends exactly how we do it. There's also when a state takes over from, let's say, peaceful to attack, and everything changes again, because it's a persistent world. We can't sort of shut down the server and start it back up again with a different setup. There might be an idea of doing a certain amount of zoning, similar to what WoW does, so that if you're in a particular area, when it switches, the area might not appear different for you until you leave the area and come back, in which point it swaps over to the actual running version of it, which kind of does break the persistent world model a little bit, but I think it's a more friendly solution to that problem than just saying, it's the enemy city now, you better leave.
Kiss your butt, people. You're all going to die.
But there might be a time limit. It's just so they can't just stay there forever.
It's difficult. It requires a lot of tweaking, but that's kind of milestone 2 concepts rather than currently. But obviously, we want to keep those in mind when we design milestone 1.
All right, with that, perfect time to take a pause for the cause, take a small break. When we come back, we can discuss a little bit more, find out what artists are in here tonight. I'll go over more of my rock thing and see what we've got. I'm anxious to see what Vincent, go ahead and load your desert scene if you can, that you have up, and I'm anxious to see what Richard has. So is that good with you guys? We'll take 7 and we'll come back.
Yep.
Sexy.
Sexy.
All right, this is Derek T. Stevens signing off just for a moment with 50 Shades of Nelson and the whole gang. We shall be back. Everybody, welcome back. 42 is the answer to everything. Just remember that. And 50 Shades of Nelson will be happy. 42 and 50 equal Nelson. And we're all back right now. Mr. Steve Curtis is talking about height maps, an aspect of our game. Again, I think it's going to bring a cohesive coolness, and that is a technical word, to this game, because it will be in a third-person shooter, WoW type sort of camera deal, but full of strategy. And Steve's going to kind of give us a taste of what this may or may not look like in the game that we're making. Steve, go ahead and explain, Lucy, explain.
Well, we were talking about the height map, so and since I'm working on another tutorial in CryEngine, I hopped in and painted a height map, and I apologize for its quality because it's like 5 minutes, but and then applied some textures, changed the sun color and the sky color to that kind of reddish purple, but not real heavy, just to kind of get an idea what that might look like in game.
Nice. Now with CryEngine, and I know we're not going to be using it, and I don't want you to spill the beans, so if I ask you a question that you, because I know you're working on it, and again, I don't want you to spill the beans for this huge, massive tutorial. How difficult was it compared to, say, using Maya or Max and importing it into Unity to create something this quick?
Well, the height map you can do, I mean, this took 5 minutes to paint a height map and 5 minutes to paint some textures, and the stuff that comes in CryEngine. But you would have a lot of work to go from here to actually make a viable looking level.
You could use the same height map in Unity, couldn't you?
Yeah, I actually exported it to the folders in the Dropbox as a Photoshop bitmap, which I think you can use in Unity, can't you, Nelson?
What?
PSD? Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yes, you can.
Well, it'd be a BMP bitmap.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's in the Dropbox folders.
Well, what would be faster, though? I mean, I understand that there'd be a lot more work to do this. Would it be just easier? Can we do an entire level utilizing technology like this, or do you want everything pieced in the modular way so we can place specifics in place?
Well, your basic terrain's probably going to be something like this. That's kind of what you're thinking, isn't it, Chris? And then we'll use meshes to flesh everything out.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how Nelson would like to handle terrain in general. But I was imagining we'd have some sort of terrain system based on a height map and then add extra brushes and detail and extra meshes on top of that, like you would do in something like CryEngine or UDK or even in Unity. Anyway.
Or in Unity, yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty standard workflow of creating some terrain and putting down some base textures and then applying static meshes and vegetation to fill it out, and hide the texture seams, etc., etc., etc. Nice.
On break, I heard Nelson talking about another project that we're working on, talking about targeting and this and that, and how hard is it going to be to implement targeting for our little blobs to do magic, so we can put them in a terrain environment like this, Nelson?
Depends.
I thought he
Yeah, I was
left.
going to say,
He's like, I'm out of crisp chips, whatever you want to call it.
it kind of depends on how we want the targeting to work, whether it's a single target or an area or things like that. I assume.
Well, I'm hoping we'll have at least, area effect. And let me ask you this, Chris. I'm not a big Guild Wars fan by any means. I don't like it. But I did like the aspect of, so you have a mage that throws up a poisonous cloud, smoke cloud, and then you had an archer that was shooting arrows through that cloud at an enemy. Well, the arrows are now poisonous and do extra damage. Have you thought about doing something like this in this game for area effects?
There would be a certain amount of synergy between characters. You would probably the thing you would end up with that kind of combination works if you have several types of different archers or several types of different ranged characters that use projectiles, like if it was guns or if it was bows or crossbows or whatever, because you set up a relationship between having a gas cloud that one character puts up and then having some projectile go through that. You would probably want to give the character who is shooting through the cloud a buff that instead of handling each projectile in of itself, partly because you don't want to overload kind of the server side client communication and dealing with exactly the exact location of projectiles constantly, which you'd have to do even to implement that system in just for one character type, because it would mean making that generic part of the engine. One thing that comes to mind is that you could have a character who can put up, who basically do both, so they can have various different types of clouds they put up and that they shoot through with a bow, and it causes it to, but that would be one character type rather than one.
I was even thinking like poisonous grenades, some sort of incendiary grenades, something maybe like that. Having projectiles go through that. I don't know how viable or realistic that would be, but just if you want to talk about strategy, I think that would be kind of a cool aspect.
Yeah, I definitely want to include characters that synergize together to be particularly powerful. But like I say, you run into some specific problems when you start having to trace every single projectile. I don't know. It depends what Nelson thinks on that end. I don't know if that's something you would do anyway.
I don't think you need to trace them. You just need to detect whether or not it goes through that area, through that cloud.
Yeah, but it would be a ray trace you do from the character to the target, and if it intersected the volume.
I would say it's probably something on the server side, not in Unity.
Potentially. It's more stuff to send back and forth. I wouldn't want to implement that.
That kind of stuff's really difficult to do server side, by the way.
Yeah, you get into a synchronization issue, I presume.
Right. It depends on how accurate you need the targeting to be. Like a server like Valve's multiplayer engine that's used for what's that game? Team Fortress 2 and Counter-Strike. What it does is when a command comes in to fire the weapon, the server actually checks the timestamp, checks the lag, rolls back the entire server-side model of the game to when the client shot in their time, performs the calculation, and then moves time forward again. And it's a really complicated thing because, in a first-person shooter or something where the targeting is that important, literally 2 pixels could mean the difference between a headshot and not shooting someone. So you have to be really careful about that.
That sounds like not the fun way.
Well, it probably wouldn't be that not as complex as that, because you're not doing a first-person shooter. All you need is a target and a destination, and then you can do calculations between those 2 points.
I know you can do a line cast in Unity that basically you could drop a line between 2 points, and it just basically checks to see if there's a collider between those 2 points. If it finds one, then you can have logic to deal with it.
So a command would include anything that it collides with?
It just basically it essentially returns true if it detects a collider between the 2 points that you've specified, and then if it does, there's the option to include additional information. You can say, okay, what was it that I collided with? Was it something that has, these given attributes to work with?
But then there is the lag to take account for as well. So what if that cloud was someone else's cloud that they casted, and by the time the player had actually sent a command that went through that cloud, the cloud had actually disappeared off everyone else's PC. It's just that they're lagging. So now you've got the situation where the player's attack has an additional bonus that they shouldn't actually have.
I'm not sure. I was actually wondering how difficult it would be to basically say you issue a command through Unity to the server, and then the server is basically what determines where people are.
Yeah, that was my thinking, is that the server should kind of handle detecting whether or not you shot through that cloud or whatever, and also tracing where the players should be, and then reporting back to each client.
Yeah.
I mean,
if we're not doing a first-person shooter, it's probably... I don't think we need the sort of precision that they have in a first-person shooter multiplayer environment.
Definitely not.
well, yeah, I mean, you would do these calculations on the server side, but the more, the more precision that's required, the more ridiculous it gets. If it just needs to be, whether a projectile went through a volume, if that volume is large enough to encompass the potential of lag, then you wouldn't have to.
Yeah, so I see the targeting kind of working similar to the way WoW does, where you kind of just tab target and you have each player has a selected target. So from that, you can kind of calculate all that stuff on the server.
Yeah.
Like, it's nothing too complicated, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the exact model of targeting that you use, whether you have lots of these sort of skill shots. I don't know if everyone knows what they are, where it's kind of a localized area effect in a particular direction, and it has a kind of width and a length, rather than specifically targeting a single individual. You have generic area effect as well. We also have a few things like kind of chain attacks which bounce off. But
they're all still doable because the server is tracking the location of the player, of every player.
Yeah, I think my slight hesitation on what Derek suggested was that I didn't want to necessarily assume that the server or the client would necessarily be tracking the position and location of each projectile, because the problem I foresee is if you do the calculation, there is a cloud up, and a player is shooting towards that cloud to get the buff for shooting through it. Now, if you're not tracking the position relative to time of that projectile, you don't know whether or not the cloud is dissipated before the projectile has gone through. Whereas with a simple raycast, you can tell whether or not it will do if the cloud persists.
I have a suggestion for that, actually. Maybe instead of doing a ray trace, if you set up the cloud object so that it has a trigger, and essentially anything that passes through that trigger gains that effect. And then once that cloud is no longer a viable entity to provide that bonus, the trigger is removed.
Yeah, but that cloud will be very dependent on your lag. If your computer's extremely laggy, you wouldn't have received the command to create that cloud until, say, maybe 500 milliseconds after everyone else.
Yeah. Well, yes,
So
but I mean, if that sort of thing is
sync
controlled by
issues
the
there.
server,
Yeah. You probably
It's
just
not
need
to
a
say that there are
projectile
a lot of
speed.
issues to do with that concept. It's not necessarily a bad concept. It just there's a lot to kind of
You
tidy
wouldn't
up.
need to track every projectile. I think you would have a shoot command that basically tells you what type of arrow or whatever got shot, and that has a projectile speed. With the speed, you can then calculate where it was
Hmm.
between your target and the cloud, and to see whether or not it actually was in the cloud or made it through the cloud before it dissipated.
Yeah.
well, most of the projectiles you're going to be shooting are going to be, I think they're going to be fast enough that it wouldn't really make much of a difference as far as you've sent the command to shoot, and that cloud is either a viable entity at that point or it isn't.
Yeah, I think that would be the easiest way. Is you just base it on at the time you sent the command to shoot.
I'm slightly uncomfortable making that assumption, but it's a working paradigm for the time being. Yeah.
Because it makes things a bit more complicated if you need to track slow-moving projectiles. But
Yeah,
it's
that
not-
was kind of my concern immediately with it. For example, if you have certain spells might have a much more of a travel time than say a bullet or an arrow.
yeah,
Even something, especially when you come into the case of long distance projectiles, something like I don't know if you've played League of Legends much, but there's a character called Ash who has an arrow that can traverse the map, and when it hits a champion, it stuns them. But it doesn't
Yeah.
interact with any other terrain in between. Now it's quite a fast-moving object, but because it's going over such a long distance, presumably they track the location of that over time, which is if you do that for one object, then does it become necessary to do that for? Well, if you're implementing it for one object, then it becomes easier to implement it for all projectiles, or pick and choose the ones you want to implement it for, because it might be extremely expensive on the server side. I don't know. I'm not a programmer, so
you don't. You mainly just need to calculate like the speed, the distance, or not the distance, the location that it's going to, and the location it came from, and from that you can calculate everything else.
yeah, you can
You don't
interpolate
need to
between the two.
sort of track the actual position.
Yeah.
Some definitely good discussion going on here, and I like that. I like that we're not only just, I mean, we had talked a bit about art tonight, and there's not a lot to show about rocks. I really do appreciate what Steve has done with the height maps. And I think the discussion we're having right now is very poignant. We definitely have, I guess, a plan. Is that right? We'll continue to make assets, and as soon as Nelson can do only what Nelson can do, we'll start moving even more forward. I'm anxious to get something like pen on paper. I'm jonesing. But they're just, from the outside, you can come in as an artist and, you know, a modeler, even though Steve hates my spaceships. We won't go into that.
Love them.
We won't go into that because, you know, as an art director, if I said, hey, you have X amount of polys and I pulled off and it's even cheaper, I would never balls a guy out in public because, you know, I'm going to cry when we get done with this. Let's test this out, Nelson. No, anyway, seriously though, I'm learning so much to hear you guys speak, and I know this originally started off as a concept art class, and we're moving beyond that. It's really pleasing to hear. What other aspects do you think is going to be difficult to tackle in a timely fashion for this whole enterprise, besides, you know, high poly models? I'm sorry, I can't help that.
Wow.
I mean, as I said before, I'm not a programmer, so I wouldn't initially like to think of what kind of problems we would come up against. I assume lag is going to be quite of an issue because even though we're dealing with reasonably high-speed objects, and as we were saying before, whether or not someone is within a area of effect might become an issue with lag.
Yeah, I would say
Deciding
lag
what
and
ca-
sync would be the biggest issues, like keeping all the characters in sync.
What can we do to deal with that? And again, I'm not busting anyone's balls here, but my question is, do we need as good-looking models as possible, but the lower the
No.
poly count, is this going to help with lag?
The models won't matter at all. It comes down to good server design,
Okay,
That's
good
another.
server client design.
It's a Nelson problem.
above my pay grade.
It's a Nelson.
What's me?
Nelson, how are you going to tackle that?
There's a new saying from now on. It's a Nelson.
Nelson. Any ideas on how to tackle that problem, Mr. Nelson?
Maybe.
Bang my head against the desk until people go away.
Stop it! Stop it!
Typically my solution to everything.
All right then. Any other artists here got some stuff to show? I've seen a couple more people sneak in, and I don't want to call anybody out, but if you have some stuff. Miguel, are you one of them, buddy? Are you here?
Nope.
Well, a couple of our core art people are not here, and a couple of the other art people here I'm going to send crying kittens to because they didn't produce jack crap tonight. I definitely, I'm one of them. I got a rock. I don't have it textured yet. It was getting in the process to being textured. And Mr. Jizba's got all the swatches in Dropbox. I can try to pull those up for us here in a second. I'm assuming they're there because I was, told that they were there. So go ahead and discuss. Really? Hold on, sorry, my computer's doing stupid stuff. Up map, small map. I'm looking for this stuff. That is not what we need. Mr. Steve, do you know where the swatches are at? Anybody still there?
I'm taking a look now.
Okay, I'm attempting
Yeah,
as well.
I'm looking around. Did he get them up?
I thought he got them up because a bunch of stuff was uploaded. What we can do is go ahead and take my screen, Mr. 50 Shades, if you would, please. Now this is kind of the inspiration that we're going for, this color of rock, this sort of texture, and again Nick is going to upload all the textures he's got from the rocks on here so we have the same color palette to kind of work with. That way we're all on the same level playing field and we have unity throughout everything. So Mr. Nato, this is the look we're going for. Is that going to be pleasing for you?
For the first map, yeah, that's fine. And we don't have any annoying foliage. That's a benefit. Foliage is a pain in the ass.
Exactly. That's why I wanted our first map to kind of be easier. I want a really cool proof of concept that we can get some stuff done, have fun, and from there we branch out. No pun on foliage, branching out.
No, I'm perfectly happy with a desert style environment. I mean,
We do need to think about how that fits into the story.
yeah, I was going to mention
Why they're fighting over that piece of land.
Yeah, we do. What would be nice is having a bit more of a sense of what's happening in the game world. I mean, it's not crucial, but it would be nice.
My thought is, because I love what Wolf was doing, we had some of these craters in some of the rocks. We can definitely have a lot of crystal-like entities or facets in the rocks. And assuming the humans are the evil, greedy scum that we all know they are, they're there to mine those crystals. And of course, We can have the Elysians on the other side, where it's kind of like a sacred garden to them, their little own Zen garden. And hey, don't be messing with my Zen garden, or you're gonna get me out of my feng shui, sort of thing. And then the fight ensues.
Well, I could see it being a fight over resources, but that does sound a little what do you call it?
Cliche?
Sabotage.
Stop that. But you're right.
What if, just had a thought, what if like this area was kind of like a breeding ground for the soul stones?
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Could work, yeah.
That's a good question for Ray. Is he ever coming back?
He's in Portugal, I think. Is it Portugal? Wherever he's at, he's moved, and he should be back within the week or 2 weeks. They're getting everything that's been shipped over there and all that sort of stuff. He will be back.
Because he's the master of lore, so.
Well, I'll pick his brain as well, because like as far as Alethea and whatnot, he's still lead as far as that goes. But he and I were kind of chatting back and forth about developing the humans side by side, but that also includes their motivations. So I'll chat with him, and we'll have something hammered out hopefully for next week.
Well, what do you
Yeah,
think
it
the
doesn't need
humans'
to be,
motivations would be? I'm seeing, and I hate to say Avatar, but the backstory is the Alethians came to Earth first and took all these vital resources, thinking us hairless apes wouldn't need them because we'd never evolved to be able to utilize them. But in doing so, taking these resources, the soul stones and stuff that were indigenous to our Earth, it threw us in this catalyst of self-destruction. Are the humans going to be coming here for payback? Do they? And I know that they have at least one human that can actually use soul stones in the time of the comic book. I just picture him being pissed off, and I want all your shit now. I'm sorry, all
Well,
your
I
stuff
think
now.
it's one of those things where like when we were talking about it, essentially the idea was that there are going to be people on both sides that some Alethians feel responsible over what they did to Earth, and there are humans that basically there's groups on both sides that are trying to find a peaceful solution, and then groups on both sides that aren't.
Hippies.
Yeah.
And as far as the girl that can use the soul stone and stuff like that, I kind of picture her coming into the scene after these initial conflicts are over and done with. So from a storyline perspective, she's one of the people that actually helps encourage a more cooperative approach to these problems, but not right
Well,
away.
Yeah, I mean, there is a big problem with story progression in these kind of games because you want to realistically want to have a kind of a stable state of play so that the game can run, especially if you have like, we're building in a sort of micro plot element where the system will change over time. But in terms of overarching plot, we don't really want to force a change of state because that would basically break the game and make it would untie the game mechanics, which is essentially combat, away from the story, which is, I think, should be about the conflict between the two sides. Now you can put in a lot of nuance in the various cities, in the various little quests. When I say cities, I mean important areas of the world, however we choose to define them. Cities is just a nice word for them. So in certain areas you might have particular quests that introduce you to sympathetic humans or sympathetic Alethians or hostile. You know, you can put nuance, you can put kind of more in-depth plot for the player to explore in those sections, and that we can move forward as long as we don't breach the kind of combat element. One of the things I definitely want to avoid at all costs is going, and here's the third faction. Look at how the Alethians and humans now get along to beat this horrible, because that's not only horribly cliche, it breaks a lot of the core kind of two factions which are ultimately balanced against each other. They just have various different flavors. And you know, so
No, it wouldn't be one of those things where all of a sudden we can't fight each other or any of that kind of thing. That sort of the option would still be on the table. It's just having groups of aliens and groups of humans that are either working together or working against each other is what it's what gives the player the flexibility to explore that story as they choose, but it doesn't necessarily force the mechanic on anybody.
I personally, if some chick was running around that was able to use a soul stone, I'm an evil Alethian, I'd want her dead because I'm one of those monkeys to be able to do that and to experiment on her. And if I was in humans and this chick got out of my control, I think she'd be better off dead as well. It could be a very cooperative type, sort of a Black Ops wet work mission.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Well,
I think that's the thing. It wouldn't necessarily. I don't know. We'll see. There's lots of, like I said, there's lots of room. There's lots of nuance for the kind of quests that transcend the basic normal matches.
We
I
don't
can't-
need to go into that much detail in terms of like quest plot lines. We just need to know why there's conflict in certain areas at the
Yeah.
moment.
Well,
Exactly.
I can't think.
sorry, go ahead.
I can't think of a reason beyond for a reason for conflict and war, or for war beyond resources, and I'm using that term liberally.
Specifically in the desert, there's no reason why humans would heavily populate a desert area other than for resources.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it could be simply
Yeah.
that there's lots of just resources. There's lots of
Or-
iron ore. There's lots of various different that's used by both sides. It's a very resource-rich area that just hasn't happened to have lots of water, or water could be the main resource of that area.
it could be a strategic
because-
place.
Yeah.
So where it's located, it could have there
That city
could be a
complex is
mountain.
like the only safe passage through.
Could be, it could be, it's control of resources, control of passages for trading, all kinds of things. I mean, it's not really that complicated. I mean, I'm using land itself as a resource to just, people expand out and want new territory, and then there's conflicts, by other people who are already in that territory, and then conflicts.
I think
Oh,
trade
man.
routes kind of falls apart when you introduce spaceships, and you could just fly over that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but is it expensive? I mean, right? To fuel the spaceship. So I don't know.
I would think that given that our world is dying, chances are resource management is at the top of their priority list. It could also be that particular region, maybe the wind is too violent for a ship to fly through there safely.
Well, I mean, it's like things can kind of domino out from a certain resources to, like we said, strategic. If you're already in a war and a battle, you want strategic points to protect, other places that aren't necessarily the desert. And so, I mean,
Well, You could also say that, I mean, I don't know, I can't quite remember what happened when wasn't there the concept that when the humans arrived on Alethea, they were given a sort of they were given some land to populate that wasn't important to the Alethians, because the Alethians were like, well, we have to help them, because their world is dying. Maybe they gave them the desert, well, there's water there somewhere, there is resources underneath the ground. So it's more like the human main settlement there.
it'd be interesting, and this is a question for Ray, but if the Alethians have a much longer
Lifespan?
and they don't produce as much as we do, they could have kind of been surprised how quickly, there could have been a manageable amount of humans at first, and that came to Alethea, and then suddenly there's so much of them in such a short time that
They're like
they're kind of
rabbits.
freaking out. Yeah.
What do you guys
So-
mean you're having kids already?
The Matrix. You guys
hasn't
are a
even been a
virus.
century.
But yeah, as long as we kind of start to consider those sort of aspects and start to ask these questions, that's what's important. But as for a beginning map, just to get something down to playtest, well, this map is fine. That style is fine. It's quite simple and decent. And you're always going to be contriving a little bit to try and get the exact style to match the plot and whatnot.
So what do you want game designers, or what do you want us to start thinking about next week for game design? What do you want us to contemplate?
Again, it still comes down to sort of character types. What do you want to play? What sort of characters kind of interest you?
I think at first, kind of the standard archetypes would be best, and then once you kind of get a feel for that, it's easier to kind of think, ooh, you know what else would be cool? And
Yeah.
Let's do that then. Let's all of us have 2 character types next week, with four attacks, 4 ideas for attacks, whether it's melee, magic, whatever, so we can start exploring and fleshing out these ideas. As far as artists are concerned, get your damn rocks done. I'm just as guilty. Start producing on that level. Also, I like to symbols and runes for Alethians. What I like to see is whenever we start texturing cities, I like to have something that makes sense, almost like, I don't want to say go far as a language, but we can at least come up with an alphabet that we can start writing in an Alethian type style. That will help out the art team tremendously.
Cool.
That's a great idea, Derek. We're going to do that.
I gave you a hoorah.
You did. I do appreciate it.
I will note from the design side, most of what needs done is basically just me to finish writing the document and really codify the stat system. So don't panic if you don't get stuff done, because it's mostly on me that side. I mean, currently, as I said before, it's not crucial that it gets done immediately. It's more important that it gets done well, and more thought puts into it, because there's no chain waiting for the design side at the moment.
Gotcha.
Have you got a list of those attributes, what their measurements are, and basically their min, max, and all that sort of stuff? So I wouldn't mind trying to do some calculations around that.
Currently no, but I can get that done in the next few days and post it on the forum. I was going to try and get that done by tonight, but I've just been too busy the past few days.
Darn
Jared,
Yes, Wolf.
an idea entered my head when you said about their alphabet. What if the symbols are in different colors? Like that might set it aside. It's like it has a different meaning by what colors they are, like the different lines and sketchings.
My goal is to have everyone.
People?
You're screwed.
Yeah, what about colorblind people?
No,
So
Alethian is
really-
colorblind.
No, but
Really,
the players playing the game are.
Yeah, but you're not going to be able to read it anyway.
Okay.
I mean,
My goal
it's
is
just there
everyone will
for
be
a
able
look.
to read and speak Alethian.
Maybe taught at college.
Yes.
Well,
I'm
you
going
also
to
get
take.
into an art problem where the city just looks like a massive pile of colours and it's just confusing. And
True,
Yeah.
like Rainbow Bright threw up. Blah.
Well, maybe 2 different colors or 3 different colors, or not
There's-
at all.
Explore it. I mean, that's what concept phases are all about. Go ahead and explore and have fun for right now. Guys, gals, thank you very much for being here tonight. I really feel comfortable about moving forward. You've seen my rock. It's not textured, but I'll have at least 3 done and textured next week. Talk more about the height maps. Hopefully Nelson will be, I know he's super busy on a lot of stuff. Maybe he will have something to show us, or moving forward, he can be the guest speaker tomorrow or next week, and we can just drill him on questions. You like that, Nelson?
Sure.
You heard it here. All right, go ahead and take us out, Mr. Nelson. Thank you guys and gals very much, as always. Spread it around. We need more art assets made. We need more art teams. We need more people that are deep, awesome thinkers like Mr. NATO and the rest of us, besides me. I just can't get over my spaceship at the moment. It's okay.
My God.
I need a hug.
I didn't even actually say anything.
Your idea is
You
stupid.
He's talking to you, Steve, not me, right? Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Take us
surprised
out of
no
here,
one
Nels.
got that.